All right, hello class. This lecture is in place of the fact that we won't see each other until Wednesday. You all should go onto Blackboard. I'm emailing you this, this link to this YouTube clip, but I'm also posting it on Blackboard. Please make sure you go through the website, evaluating websites. This kind of is a hands-on approach to what we discussed on Wednesday about the different types of websites, the difference between a .org and a .com and a .edu and a .gov, and how to determine if a website is worthy of being in your paper, is a good source. For the most part, websites are kind of dangerous. We're not really sure who puts them up. Especially if they don't have an about us link or some sort of link determining who is running and funding the website. Even education sites can be suspect, as some education sites are run by the college or the professors, but many colleges now allow students to host their own websites through the school, and those are .edu, just like the professors and the college ones. So again, be careful, be a good investigator and a smart researcher. So this evaluating websites link will help you do some hands-on approach to looking at different types of websites and whether those websites would make good source materials. Aside from that, I'm going to talk a little bit in just a few minutes about scholarly versus popular magazines, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to tell the difference. And I'm going to include a link to a website on that as well. You also should be watching the Persuaders, which is a documentary about an hour long about the advertising industry, which is going to be our next subject that we'll be looking at, and how advertising utilizes different terms and how they can persuade you to buy things through a somewhat manipulative manner. So please watch that documentary. We will be talking about it on Wednesday when you come back. There's also a quiz and a discussion board up. The quiz is 5 questions, each worth 20 points, just like the quizzes you take in class. The only thing is, this time you're going to get your grade right away. Note that if you gave me an outline, I looked through all the outlines that were given, with the exception of one that didn't put a name on theirs. So make sure when you hand me stuff, your name's on it. I then scanned them and I emailed them all to you. So you should be able to go into the Blackboard mail and be able to see if you gave me an outline, to be able to see the outline in some of the comments. I made comments about the organization or your thesis, whether it was there or not, or whether it was strong enough or not. We will be talking more about thesis statements on Wednesday, as well as paragraphs and transitions. But please make sure you bring your first draft, even if it's incomplete, on Wednesday, so that we can go over it and look at how to strengthen your paper through peer review. Again, if you want any help on your paper before that, I will be on campus between 11:45 and 10:45 and 12:30, between 10:45 and 12:30 on Wednesday, to help anybody in a one-on-one session. Or you can always email me your first draft and I will go over it and email it back to you with my comments and suggestions. One of the things you're going to be looking at is your 2 sources. You can always use your textbook, and I will be putting online the exact citation of your textbook sometime between now and Wednesday. If you go onto the databases and use material from the databases, I showed you already how to get the citation from there, but I will go over that again on Wednesday as well. Now, if you choose a magazine or a newspaper, how do you know if that's a good source? Well, for the most part, they are good sources because they've gone through an editorial board. But with the new advancement of online newspapers and online magazines, sometimes that can be suspect as well. One of the things you want to look for is, again, who publishes it and who is behind, if it's a website, who is funding the website. Also be aware that some newspapers and magazines have a bias. That doesn't mean they're wrong. That doesn't mean that the information's not valid. It just means that the information is tilted in a certain way. The typical bias that we see is political, whether it's conservative or liberal. Give you an example. Fox News is considered a politically conservative news source, while MSNBC is often tilted towards a more liberal source. What does that mean? Does that mean either of them aren't valid? No, they both are valid. It just means that when they look at information and they look at news, they often slant it towards the political leanings that they have. Newspapers and magazines can also follow this. So the New York Times, for example, is often considered a more liberal newspaper with a bias towards the Democratic Party and a more liberal political ideology. While its sister newspaper, the New York Post, which is owned by the same guy that runs Fox News, seems to have a more conservative leaning. The same with the Wall Street Journal. They tend to be more conservative. Mother Jones says right on their ads that they are a more liberal. The same with The Nation, a more liberal magazine, while National Review is a more conservative magazine. You can also have magazines that are biased towards a particular religion or particular other philosophy, environmentalism perhaps, things of that nature. So be aware of that. The biases usually only occur in what we call popular magazines. These are magazines published for the general public. Magazines that are published for the general public usually are bright, have bright covers to them with pictures often of famous people or people that would get you to maybe want to purchase the magazine or newspaper. They're often filled with advertisements trying to get you to buy the certain items, cars or beer or perfume or clothes. That's because some of their funding is being put through for advertisers paying for it. That's keeping the cost down to the general public. Now, scholarly or peer-reviewed articles are not like that. Their covers tend to be very plain with maybe just the title on there and a solid color often. Peer-reviewed articles are usually academic journals. They're usually focusing on some academic field of learning, like the Modern Language Association has a peer-reviewed journal called the PMLA. Or you may see the Nurses Review or Holistic Medicine Review. Whatever field of study you're in, there is most likely a peer-reviewed journal that goes with it. Sometimes many. Medicine has hundreds, if not thousands, of peer-reviewed journals. These are often very expensive, so the average person doesn't buy these. Part of their expense comes from the fact that there are no advertisements, with the exception of maybe some textbooks. Why? Because they don't want to bring in the bias that advertisement brings. These are journals created to give knowledge from those particular academic fields. They don't want to bring a bias of any kind to their journal. So very little advertising, very little of the flash and color that we see in a popular magazine. Scholarly journals are considered your best sources. Why? Because they are put through a very difficult editorial process. When you write for a journal, an academic journal, you need to submit your article before an editorial board of people that are at the highest level of your field. They then look at the journal, make comments, question your conclusions and your ideas, and even your research. Oftentimes you may have to rewrite your journal article 3 or 4 times or more. Thus, a journal article doesn't come out very quickly. Most have to go through this pretty serious process for months to, and maybe even a year. So journals aren't great places to go find new information or the most cutting edge information. Journals are where you go to find the most secure information. You want cutting edge, a newspaper is your best spot to go. If you want very good material that's well documented and constructed and proven, a scholarly journal is your best. Students often then ask, well, if I'm writing a paper, where do I go? What should I look for? Here's my thought to you. Right now, you're at a level where you're not going real deep into topics. You're still looking at pretty much the surface level of information. So where should you go? Well, databases are still one of your best and easiest places to go. But scholarly journals can often be too deep for your level of writing at this general studies, general ed level of composition. Scholarly journals are often for your main research in your major's topic. When you start to get into the higher levels of your major is when you'll start looking into scholarly journals. Right now, magazines are often a good place for you to go. News magazines like Time, Newsweek, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, all make wonderful sources for your writing in a general education course like Comp 101. So, that being said, what should you do? Well, first, you're given the opportunity of using your textbook, which already has gathered essays about the subjects that I choose for you to write on. So they make a great source for you to go to. Where to go beyond that? Well, I've gathered in each of our weeks some websites that would go well with your topics. So please feel free to use those. If you're not sure how to cite them, please email me and I will help you. You can also go to some of those online websites like NightCite and Sun Up Citation Machine and CiteFast. You can also go onto the databases. EBSCOhost is a great database to use, as is Opposing Viewpoints. Both of them have a great deal of knowledge on your subject matters, dealing with some of the controversial issues surrounding them, as well as general information. Don't get too bogged down at this point in the academic scholarly journals. Instead, be content with some of the more popular magazines, as they will cover the general information issues that you're going to be focusing on for this paper. Again, Google's not a bad place to go, but be very aware that not all websites are created equal. Try to stick to websites that are sponsored by familiar sounding names. Places like Time.com or CNN.com or HuffingtonPost.com. These are places where there is an editorial board to look at your information and to make sure it's truthful, but not necessarily go into the details as you would see in some of the more academic journals. For example, our two subject matters are, for this paper, are women's body image in the media and body augmentation in the form of tattoos or other augmentations depending on how you wanted to approach the topic. So let's look at that one. If you went onto a scholarly journal, yes, you might find information on how to perform plastic surgery or maybe the medical risks accompanying it or the morbidity outcomes, things that doctors may need to know, but you don't need to know in a general education article, a general education class. So be careful. Don't go too deep in some of them, or you will get trapped in information that really isn't relevant. Don't be worried if you do find the information you're reading too difficult to use as support. Just reject it and go find something else. If you have problems looking for material to support your thesis, email me. I will be glad to help you with your research. Alright, we are going to be not together on Monday, but we will be back together on Wednesday. So please make sure you've done the reading and the text and watched the documentary. Also make sure you bring the first draft of your paper, even if your paper is not complete yet. The first draft will help us to see how you're doing and give you a chance to have your fellow classmates look at your material and give their suggestions as a reader. Remember, in writing, you always have a reader. So you have to make sure your material is understandable and that a reader can follow your thought process. Too often when we write, we kind of write with ourselves knowing what's next. So you say things like using general terms like it or those guys or them or that. You know what you mean, but your reader can be confused. So this is where peer review becomes very important. Having someone look over your material to see if there's a good organizational pattern, if you're not being too generalized, if they understand what you're trying to say. We know what we're always trying to say, but communicating to another is a little different and much more difficult. So I'm glad to see that you all tuned into this. Again, we are going to be meeting again on Wednesday. Then you'll be back on your schedule. Some of you have emailed me about your journals. You will have a journal due Wednesday. You can either bring it to class if you want me to have the paper version, or you can post it online or email it to me up to midnight Wednesday. See you Wednesday.